Yeah, greetings, comrades. For those who have joined us now, greetings to all of you from wherever you're joining us. To those who always watch our recordings, we do appreciate your presence. And to those who will be doing a review of this recording as well, we greet you all, and we beseech your request, if you find time, please join us. But you can always also engage us in our comment section, because we have comment section even in our YouTube. So once again, feel most welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. As usual, we are proceeding with our reading of Conscience Study Group. Conscience Study Group actually is a philosophical and ideological study groupings. We are dedicated to study the ideology and philosophy for decolonizing Africa, prescribed or written by Osejafio Dr. Kwame Nkrumah in his book called Conscientism. And in this, we do read to understand and share our thinking in regards to what Nkrumah was thinking. So we came from introduction, we went to philosophy in retrospect, and we've been now in chapter 2, philosophy and society. Nkrumah wanted to look at society because, of course, all of us belong to a society. How are a society set up, and which philosophy and ideology are they using? And how do philosophies and ideologies affect society? Now, Nkrumah has been taking us to various philosophers who were then known back then, or whom majority of us who think of philosophy or read philosophy have actually interacted with their works. And therefore, through interaction with their works have actually affected, influenced, or probably been the foundation of how societies are organized. Some of them might have borrowed their thinking from us. Some of them might diffuse that, because we've been looking all along from philosophers like Socrates to Plato to now Aristotle. And now in Aristotle and Plato, we've been having the conversation on how they view a society. Some think that a society is made up of persons, who others are natural slaves, while others, in other thinking, they claim that people are born and society structure people based on education. So some are then either teachers, others are doctors, others are farmers. And according to Plato, in his thinking called the Meno, he feels that, or he thinks that, people in a society are not equal. And this is a fundamental function of the word egalitarianism in a society, equality of persons in a society, something Socrates fundamentally believed in. But Plato and Aristotle are trying to bring differences of persons in a society. But yes, we say people are equal, but some are equal than others. Plato brings the aspect of education as a classification that makes people to do different jobs in a society. Hence, they are not equal. Aristotle is talking about that some people are born naturally slaves, others are either men born naturally leaders, and that he looks at the Greek society where he says that everybody was not having right to make socio-political decisions, because maybe they were thought not to be at a level that their mind could comprehend and make political decisions, or so-called participate in the democracy in such society. Now that and these has been fundamental questions, and now we've been moving in the previous class looking at the society. Is society finite, and is it static? Is our society evolving, and is our society endless, do not have an end, or whether is our society constant? And that leads to a competition of a perfect society. Aristotle thinks, Plato thinks democracy or democratic setups was a perfect society. Well, something that was not a perfect society, and that there's nothing like a perfect society. A society is in a continuous process of evolution and evolving. So these are the key concepts we have been interacting with. But in the previous aspect of discussion that I was bringing on equality and differences in a society, in Nkrumah's style of writing, he first of all exposes and record clearly what a philosopher thinks, and they write it as the philosopher thinks. Then he tried now to cross-examine the philosopher's thinking, so that in the end he can arrive at his stand that is actually deduced from weaknesses, strength, and study to build a stronger alternative solution. So like in the case where there was an argument that the society, people are not equal in society, Nkrumah then concluded by saying that people are equal. The intrinsic worth of an individual is equal. For example, whether you are a woman, you're a man, a child, an old person, your equality or your worthiness as a human being is equal. So there's nobody whose worth as a human being is not equal or is not considerable just because they are either children, they are either women, or they are either whatever they are. So Nkrumah fundamentally believes that everybody in a society is equal. Nkrumah then claims that the differences in functions, for example, that are caused by environment or social conditions do not mean the differences in terms of intrinsic worth of an individual. So the fact that you're a doctor, I'm a slave, or in that time, in the fact that others were calling themselves slave masters and others were slaves, that did not mean that they were not worth human beings. In the fact that one is a teacher and one is a president, it doesn't mean that a teacher is not worth to that society as a president. Those are functional differences, which you must accept that they must exist. But those differences should not lead us to form or cause what you call intrinsic worth differences of a person. Our differences functionally, physically, in fact, even his concept on racism is that we are all coming from the same matter. Wherever you are, even if you expose yourself to the writings of the origin of a white man, it's from a black man. So irrespective of the color, the size, and everything else, we are all human beings who come from the same matter, and in that regard, we are all equal. Differences might be there in color, gender, age, sex, whatever it is, but that do not bring out the differences in terms of us as persons. Now here we've been looking at the society and the differences of what people project in a society. Aristotle and Plato trying to create the so-called Hitlers, Bonaparte, and so many things. And all their projects of fine and perfect projects fail. And Nkrumah has exposed that failure, and they are thinking very widely. Now where we are looking at exactly what we call Nkrumah now trying to bring his thinking in regards to what he has exposed previously on the thinking of Plato and Aristotle. So this is what you're going to read in the paragraphs covered here. Here is Nkrumah now sharing his thinking, or this is Nkrumah now speaking after referring and critically examining the thinking of Plato and Aristotle. And after this reading, we'll ask you also to share with us what do you think in regards to what Nkrumah is thinking. So that's what you do every day and every time for the last 2 to 3 years. And some people think that is not important. But we realize that's very important because we understand then the origin and the philosophies and thinking that's present that now forms the fundamental society we have today in modern Africa. They have borrowed a lot of what was there. And in order to destroy this and have a proper Africa, we need to understand the origin of this and the weaknesses of this philosophy that they have borrowed or carried forward to the present African state as it is per today. Now, having said that, comrades, permit me once again to recognize your presence, Sister Valerie, Brother Coco, Brother Devin, and I think Sister Tapo is also here with us. Sister Valerie, permit me to request you, if you are able, to read for us the paragraphs highlighted slowly. If you're not in a position, I'll ask Sister Tapua to do so.
Oh, the paragraph that starts with I have?
Yes.
I have suggested that the attempt to fix... Are you hearing me?
Excuse, Sister Valerie?
Yes.
Take it as slow as you can. So that, because as you are reading, we are also trying to project it to our mind. We take it to internalize it as you are also reading it with us. So please, go as slow as you can.
Okay. I have suggested that attempt to fix categories, basic general concepts, in terms of which alone the world must appear to us and become intelligible, is an attempt to hold the dialectic of thoughts an attempt to freeze it at a certain stage. In the dialectic of thoughts, a cardinal idea is introduced, and it is worked out in considerable details. After a certain point, an idea antithetic, to it appears on the scene, and in an attempt to reconcile them, a new idea is produced. And this new idea initiates a similar process in laying down basic concepts which cannot admit of revision. Aristotle was attempting to halt the dialectic of thoughts. I also suggest that in the social field, Aristotle tried to arrest the dialectic of society. For in his treatment of the democratic society as the perfect form of society was attempted to lay down a terminal to social evolution, and so to thwart dialectic. And yet his own position represented a stage in the unfolding of society dialectic. The that's a big word. Egalitarianism, which early Greek philosophers introduced, could be formulated in terms of individualism. And Aristotle democratic idea, with its insistence on unequal individualism, was after all a particular way of spelling out the big word that I'm having problems.
That is egalitarianism.
Egalitarianism, thanks, which the early Greek philosophers pitted against the sacredolic Aristotelic oligarchy, to the extent that individualism accepts an axiomatic the initial equal value of the individual. Egalitarianism can be formulated in terms of this, but evidently, individualism alone cannot determine the form of social organization. For individualism may lead to capitalism, or it may lead to socialism.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the reading. I'll do another reading as well, and I ask you to internalize it as well. As you try to understand the concept, take it deep in your mind, take it and try to start forming your thinking. Nkrumah says, as it says here, that I have suggested that the attempt to fix categories, basic general concepts, in terms of which alone the world must appear as and become intelligible, is an attempt to halt the dialectic of thought, an attempt to freeze it at a certain stage. In the dialectic of thought, a cardinal idea is introduced, and it is worked out in considerable detail. Let me proceed. It is worked out in a considerable detail. After a certain point, an idea antithetic to it appears on the scene, and in an attempt to reconcile them, a new idea is produced. And these new ideas initiates a similar process. In laying down basic concepts which cannot admit a revision, Aristotle was attempting to halt the dialectic of thought. also suggest that in the social field, Aristotle tried to arrest the dialectic of society. For in his treatment of the democratic society as the perfect form of society, he was attempting to lay down a terminal to social evolution, and so to thwart the dialectic. And yet, his own position represents a stage in the unfolding of social dialectic. The egalitarianism which early Greek philosophy introduced could be formulated in terms of individualism. And Aristotle's democratic ideal, with its insistence on an equal individualism, was, after all, a particular way of spelling out that egalitarianism with the earlier Greek philosopher pitted against the sacerdotal aristocratic oligarchy to the extent that individualism accepts as axiomatic the initial equal value of the individual. Egalitarianism can be formulated in terms of it. But evidently, individualism alone cannot determine the form of social organization. For individualism may lead to capitalism, or it may lead to socialism. So comrades, this is our reading for today. And basically here we are dealing with the dialectic of thought and society. And the key issue is between egalitarianism and individualism. So we are looking at the dialectic of thought, the concept on itself, and how it progressed. We are looking at how Aristotle's view of democratic society might aim to halt social evolution. We are also looking at how actually the egalitarianism, this dialectic of thought and this dialectic of society, how Aristotle's influence on social dialectic and his view of democratic society as an ideal, and how Aristotle's view on democratic society might aim to halt the evolution of society. We're also looking at egalitarianism and individualism, the relationship between the both, and key issues and key question is how does the introduction of antithetic ideas contribute to the procession or progression of thought. So along so many things we discuss here, we are not limiting, or neither do we judge how you want to share your thinking. What we ask you is to read the text slowly, and we'll go around and call your name and share with us not basically what you understand, but what you think. Because thinking is formed out of understanding. So once you read the text, digest what you see here and understand. Now share with us what you think in regards to this text. So thank you once again to those who have joined us as we were going on with this. And yes, let me go through my list based on also how people join us here. I'll go to Brother Coco. Greetings. Are you in a position to speak? Last time I know you came late. You spoke towards the end. I don't know it was on Thursday or Saturday. But let me know if you're in a position to go first. Brother Coco? You can unmute yourself, Brother Coco, if you are ready.
Yeah, I tend to forget that the headset I use has a problem with the mic. So it took me time to unmute. Interesting discussion. I think if there's no one to go before me, then I will go, because we have to make a start. Thank you for the reading, and again for reading it again. Sister Valerie, thank you for persisting, even though the Dr. Nkuma sometimes uses very, very big words. It was, I think, a custom at the time to use big words to show you master English, or you master the language, or you master the concepts being discussed. So we are going to try and explain what this means. We talked about egalitarianism a lot before. In fact, that was contrasted with anarchism. So egalitarianism, which we usually quote as Africans from the continent, even those who are not from the continent, we all know what Ubuntu is. Ubuntu, I am because we are. So we take into account that one cannot exist in isolation or in a vacuum. We are who we are because of the society around which we live, within which we live. They make us who we are, they shape us, and it's only important that we give back to the society in one way or another. And taking care of the people who vote you into power and making sure they get the Jews, or they get everything that they need from the state, is a form of egalitarianism, because you are carrying out a duty given to you by the people who made you who you are. And that wells up from a leader is only a leader by the virtue of his people. Morena, ki morena, kasichana. That comes from the Sesotho language, which we use in Southern Africa. And also, umundu, ngumundu, ngabantu, mutu, imutu kabatu. As I said before, I am because we are. So that also wells up from Ubuntu. Going back to Aristotle, in the first paragraph, Dr. Nkuma is trying to emphasize that by Aristotle laying down what the basic concepts are, he is trying to stop any revision to the ideas that he puts forward. In short, he says, this is the theory, this is the instruction. Let's not even say theory, this is the instruction. This is how things are. Democracy is the only perfect solution in the world. Nothing else can take its place. But we know the flaws of democracy. There is no egalitarianism within democracy. Or should I say, egalitarianism is not embraced fully within democracy. I listened to Joe Biden's speech yesterday when he was claiming how democracy is the best thing since sliced bread. And I thought to myself, I don't see that. In fact, he in the end admitted that oligarchy is taking over. So with oligarchy, we see all the rich people of America, all the rich people of the world actually now coming to the fore and financing the political process. That's what's happening in America as we speak. Because people like Elon Musk bought the elections for Trump. And people like the Facebook and Meta principal, he is behind Trump. So in short, they are telling us what to do, what not to do, what to believe in and what not to believe in. And the democratic process in America, as you see it, is actually a classic example of how oligarchy is in power. Because only two main parties can play. And within those only two parties, that doesn't mean only Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or Donald Trump are the best candidates that they have. It's those who shout the loudest, or those who have more money, who have deeper pockets. You already know that Comrade Pickbin, because you ran in the Kenyan elections, you know how it is. There are very exorbitant costs of playing a part in any democratic process in the world, because democracy is not fair. There's nowhere where it allows any small man to come in and say, this is my bit, I will play my part. So what Aristotle was saying was, this is the instruction. These are the parameters. In fact, you can't even get out of these parameters. You have to operate within these parameters. But the dialectic of thought, with dialectics, again, we are talking about the contradictions of metaphysics. And within those contradictions of metaphysics, we are also looking at solutions. So dialectics of thought allows people to discuss everything, talk about it, discuss it until we get to a solution. So here we get to a system which the Africans adopted before, in which we had to reach a consensus before we moved on. Everyone had to be happy that whatever was adopted was right for everyone. So in being fully represented in any process, if there is no consensus, there is no egalitarianism, how is that system representative? So I think this is what Dr. Nkume is saying in that first paragraph there, laying down the challenge to say, democracy, you have to look at it carefully. It has all the trappings of oligarchy on it. It's nothing to do with egalitarianism. It's anarchy, or it's oligarchy pretending to be egalitarianism. And if we look at individualism, for sure, we can understand how capitalism comes out of individualism, because it's always about exceptionalism. It's survival of the fittest. And in survival of the fittest, you cannot expect egalitarianism. Is who gets what? I mean, they say everyone for themselves and God for all. So every man fights for whatever they think they can get, and then whatever else they don't get, again, they're going to even fight for that. That is what capitalism is about. That's what competition is about. Toxicity is introduced by that kind of competition, where one man will own $1 trillion, and then the other people don't have anything to eat. It's the same in America. You go to America, you find there are streets full of homeless people who have mental issues, but the state is not even, doesn't care about that. It's looking at those with money, and it espouses the theory which was introduced by one Friedman, Milton Friedman, who was a teacher to both Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, and introduced to them the concept of that it will filter down, it will drill down to the common man. You give people at the top
Brother
tax
Coco,
breaks.
trickle down economics.
Thank you very much. I even forgot what that that was called, but that's the basis of capitalism. And capitalism and egalitarianism, there is nothing. They don't go together. Let me stop at this point and allow other members to feedback, because that's how dialectics of thought happens. We come up with ideas, everyone comes and shares, and in the end, we probably have consensus, and it might not be that my idea is the best, but it might help someone else who wasn't thinking the same way I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Coco. Is there anybody who have any question to Brother Coco to pursue further his thinking? If there's no, we'll go to Sister Tapua. Sister Tapua, I want to get to you before your network misbehaves. Sister Tapua? Or she's already out? She's in. Sister Tapua, let me know if you are able to unmute yourself and join us. If you're not, then I'll go to in that order. Let me check my order. Davin, we were having after Sister Tapua, we had Davin. I think Davin has also left. Okay. We'll go to Sister Mara. Are you in a position to speak? I know you said you'll be
Hello?
listening.
Hello?
Oh,
Hello?
Sister Tapua, you're here. Yes.
Papua. Yes, I'm now in a position to speak. Sorry about that.
Yeah, please proceed.
Right. Thank you very much, everyone. What I am getting, what's coming to mind for me is the fact that the philosophers that Nkrumah was referring to all want to fix a position, and they all want to make sure that that position is not changeable, and it's unrealistic. So what Nkrumah is saying is, this is an attempt to stop us at that time when they were at the apex and influencing society. And like we said last week, the same thought has been maintained throughout society. I mean, throughout the modern era. Because what you find is, they want to perpetuate the position of the Black person as inferior. Remember, we're talking about how slavery fitted into the Greek society, and they want to maintain that. And yet, that's not how things work. Because if we're saying we're talking about dialectics, it means there's always progression in ideas, and we cannot freeze ideas based on pre-colonial Africa or colonial Africa or post. We've got to move forward. And for me, it also speaks to the ideas that we have as Africans, that we want to go back to pre-colonial in order to compensate for what has happened to us. What this is saying to me is, yes, we can remember that era, but we need to understand that there's always dialectics. So within the ideas of the Africans, we still need to move on with what is happening around us so that we're not static. We're not going back to that period of time, but we're moving on with the ideas of the African philosophy. My mind has also been jogged to think of how the current politics in Africa today, where dominant political parties, whether it be ZANU-PF or ANC, want to maintain the status quo. They don't want dialectics. They don't want anybody else thinking differently. If you think differently, then you might be perceived as the enemy. But that's so unnatural. Because if we're taking what Nkrumah is saying, that when you have one idea and you look thoroughly at one idea, you always have another idea, which is slightly different from that one, influencing the next idea. So I think as Africans, we need to just be aware and try and work at our own societies to accept that differences are fine. It's okay to be different, because if we are different, then we progress. If we're the same, we're static and we don't make any progress. So my idea, the main thought that I have therefore is, it is important for us, even as we're talking today, to accept the dialectic of thought. As we move towards a united Africa, we want to be able to accept the dialectic of thought from the different groups that we have and move on. Because as long as we have a common goal, we might be different camps, we might be different in terms of ideas of how we want to project, but everyone is important towards that goal. because we need to make sure that we are working together. And like my brother said, we are. I am because we are. And as long as we acknowledge that others are important, then we'll be okay. I think I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Tapua. And Sister Valerie, thank you for joining us in advance. I hope to see you with us next week. I'll share the recordings. You can be able to leave your contact in the text or in the chat before you leave. I'll also be able to share with you the recording so that you can follow up and catch up with us from where you left. Okay, Brother Carrington?
Thank you.
Brother Carrington, welcome.
Yes. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. And good morning if you're on the other side of the planet.
I feel you are very low. I don't know if you are, I'm the one who can't get you clearly.
Sorry, am I clear?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good evening, everyone. These three paragraphs basically play out the position we were discussing last week. The position of the tendency among some philosophers, political theorists, politicians, to describe a certain state of society as perfect. The Osagefo is basically saying that what they are actually doing is phrasing the dialectic, essentially trying to switch off contest, trying to switch off any challenge to the state of authority of society, then because a challenge to the state of society then is a challenge to their authority. And because of this, because the authority is being challenged, they would not want that. So some philosophers start with the philosophical position of describing a philosophically ideal state, then get to the politics of saying that their society, their respective society, is in that quote unquote perfect state and therefore does not need change. And in fact, what they are saying is that their society does not need challenge. So, again, this book is threaded through. I haven't read the whole of it, but up to where we have reached, you can see this consistent flow of how someone's philosophy influences their ideology and how their ideology influences their policy, if they are powerful, i.e., their societies to be organized, that their political implications to how you view the world, something that is often unstated. And sometimes this is not well articulated amongst especially Africa's political class, that they have implicit ideologies which even they themselves are not aware of, that allow them or cause them to suppress or oppress any forms of challenge in their countries. Finally, I'd like to finish. I don't have a lot to say, but I'd like to finish by a question. I don't know whether this has been addressed, but I would really love to understand how the Osagefo thought that individualism can account for socialism. It is something that I'm completely confused in the last statement. So for individualism may lead to capitalism or it may lead to socialism. I would really love to see the process by which, the logical process by which we can get to socialism by individualism. I'm a bit confused by that. And anyone who wants to answer, I will yield some of my time for that answer. Thank you very much.
Brother Carrington, thank you very much. Let's address that part you are raising and let's look at the almost 3 sentences prior to that concept. So it started by saying that, I will start by saying that to the extent that individualism accepts us axiomatic the initial equal value of individual. Egalitarianism can be formulated in terms of it. In this sentence alone, that line alone, individualism is accepting the initial equal value. I'm an individual, which means then you confirm that you meet the initial value of being an individual. You meet what we call the intrinsic worth of being an individual, which means either biologically, if you want to look at it, you believe and feel that your composition and how you are as a structured being, you are fit to be an individual, which means you meet all the qualities that makes you be a human being. So you meet that aspect of initial equal value of the individual. Now, the next line says that egalitarianism can be formulated in terms of it. Now, that will come in. Egalitarianism then is the equality. The equality of persons, of all of us, can then be formulated out of the individual equality or individual worthiness. Because if you don't believe that an individual is worth as an individual in terms of his structure and how he is composed to make up a full individual, then you'll never believe in egalitarianism, which is the equality of various individuals. Because when you talk of now egalitarianism as an equality of us, I think what Brother Coco said previously, the I am, because you are. Now the you are is the egalitarianism aspect of it. You, so me and you, I and you. But before I become who I am as I am, I first of all accept your individual equality, your individual worthiness as a person. So you are. Then now we can only view or we can only claim that we bring egalitarianism or equality of persons once first of all we agree that that person is an individual worth or is worth to be a person. So it's not, for example, if he's maybe is disabled, we don't say that irrespective or if they, because they are disabled, they're not persons. Whether they're disabled, whether they are women, whether they are youth or they are old, we first of all believe and agree that at their individual capacity, they meet the worthiness of being a person. They are a complete person. Now, if we accept that, then we can now accept the equality of persons, which is egalitarianism. Something which some, like Aristotle did not accept. Irrespective of Aristotle confirming and accepting that you are equals, but he feels that some were meant to be slaves, naturally. Which basically, he tries to say, some are meant not to be equal. Or, in his concept of democracy, he said that some in a society were not having the power or ability to make political choice. That aspect alone is contradicting his aspect of who is an individual. Because if you agree that an individual is a complete person with equality and ability to do everything else, then you can accept the egalitarianism that now the combination of those individuals. And remember what Aristotle said previously on what is a state. He says a state is a union of individuals. Now in these individuals, he's thinking that is a union of individuals of a certain worth. Either the oligarchs, either the bourgeoisies, those are what makes a state. But rather it's not an aggregate of men. You see? Because when you bring aggregate of men, you're talking about now egalitarianism, the togetherness of men in a society. And when you talk of the word men, you mean that these are persons who qualify to be men. But then when he brings the aspect of union of individuals, in his aspect of individuals, he left out some people whom he felt were not qualified to be individuals as per his measures. And therefore, that his position contradicts egalitarianism. Because if you don't first of all believe on the fundamental foundation that Brother Carrington is worth an equal human being, then you cannot say that now Brother Carrington and Brother Pigeon are equal, which means there's egalitarianism in that society. So that's the second line. But let's go now to the last line, which you're bringing, second last line. It says, but evidently, individualism alone cannot determine the form of social organization. Yes, because an organization or a society is not only based on individual, it's based on union of individuals or aggregate of men in a society. Now everybody else. So being individual alone or looking at personal interests alone cannot make a social organization. So organization of a society cannot only be made on your personal or individual interest alone. And I will say, for individualism may lead to capitalism when you only think about yourself alone, or it may lead to socialism. Now that is where you are asking the question: how does it lead to socialism? And that takes us back to our question: what is socialism?
You are asking me.
Yeah, what do you understand by the aspect of socialism? So that we can then categorize, because of course, in basic concept, individualism is perceived as capitalism. Because capitalism then is the pursuit of one's goal, you see? It's not about their social welfare, it's my money, my money, my money, my money. So you put money for your personal interest beyond even the welfare of the people.
Yes. So socialism to me is basically the idea of collective power, collective ownership, and collective responsibility of the society, sometimes practiced through the state. So that's why I'm confused a bit. But
Now, let's trace it a bit. Now, when you talk of individualism, which I say then is actually, if you take individualism to the first definition we had in the previous paragraph, in the first line we inserted that to the extent that individualism accepts, to that extent, that individualism accepts the initial equal value of the individual. To that extent, can it then lead to socialism?
so it can lead to a form of egalitarianism. I struggle to see how it can lead to socialism unless it is. Yes, Sister Tapo has raised her hand. Maybe she can clear it.
Okay, Sister Tapua, feel free to come in. And anybody else want to come in this level?
I think, Brother Carrington, the way you've defined socialism is actually, it actually contains your answer, because you're saying collective. The moment we use collective, we're acknowledging the individual in the group.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What they're coming up with is consensus of the direction in which they go.
Yes.
So, for example, if we take the political parties in America, one is, from my point of view, ultra-capitalist. It's groups of individuals who have said it's better for society to move in this direction. And then you have the Democrats who are also thinking of a different direction. So individuals, once they become a collective, can either move society into the capitalist direction or the socialist direction. So even when we say a person is a person because of other people, we are saying you cannot be without other people. In other words, we cannot effect a system without individuals getting together and agreeing. So the basis is individuals. Individuals must agree to go in a particular direction. Therefore, it then makes sense for individualism may lead to either. And this is where we have got democratic elections going on and people saying, oh, individuals, we've got a greater number of individuals who think we should go in that direction, therefore we should go in that direction. So that for me answers your question. The fact that you've said collective.
But
You're acknowledging.
yes, Sister Tapo, but I only want to add that it only answers that question if it is as per the previous sentences, that to the extent that that individualism accepts the axiomatic, the initial equality of men. If it does not recognize that initial equal value of individuals, then, because I think the fundamental basis of socialism, when we talk of collective, is a recognition of each individual's ability to contribute to that collective.
Mm-hmm.
If you are thinking of those individuals as discriminative, for example, if your collective only makes up collective of men with money, or collective of women together, or collective of women alone, then in that way it cannot lead to a social level, or socialism. But if your concept of individualism accept equality of persons, for example, in a country, we have doctors, we have women, we have children.
Yeah.
Now, for a country to move forward, it requires collective effort of everybody. And for you to have
Yes.
collective effort of everybody, you must first of all recognize that everybody has equal value to contribute to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what we're coming across here is a situation where dialectics forces those people who don't think we are equal to acknowledge to an extent that helps them preserve their idea. So, for example, when we're talking about Greek society and we're referring to the position of slaves in that society, is the dialectic that was acknowledging that these people are playing a role, but it's not equal. So we've continued with that dance where we're saying Black people can vote, and they only acknowledge it in as far as it helps to preserve their position. So, for example, if I were to go back historically, with the enslaved people in America, we had maroon societies. People were fighting back. There was a majority of Black people in those areas, and they were fighting. And to acknowledge this, to actually say, we're getting defeated in this battle with the formation of Haiti and all that, they then came up with, we are freeing slaves, so that the power shifts from the people who were enslaved fighting. The enslavers then turn around and say, it's us who are giving them the freedom. The same thing has happened with post-colonial Africa. You find we fought, we were winning, but then at some point, because they're acknowledging the dialectics, but they're taking advantage in order to preserve their position, they end up saying, we are the ones who freed slaves. We are the ones who facilitated decolonization. We are the ones who are helping Blacks around the world to be woke, you know? So there's always that subtleness, the dance that goes on between the two ideas. And with the fight for who's speaking last here, who's able to read the situation. And what we have currently is the perpetuation of a particular system. They read the situation and they know that this is what's going to happen. So they anticipate what's going to happen and they put the cards on their table to their advantage.
Thank you, Sister Tapo. Let me go to Brother Coco, then I'll get to Brother Carrington in case you have anything else to add, and then we go to other comrades who haven't shared their thinking as well. Welcome, Raspala. Brother Coco?
Yes, thank you, comrade. Brother Carrington, good question, good call. I saw that, but I decided not to delve into it, nor even ask, but I knew it was going to come up in the discussion. I think you have already covered it, but I would like to sort of highlight a couple of things. One is look at the two extremes. We are talking about capitalism, which outright is only for whoever can make the best for everyone else. But I mean, amongst the first among equals, in short. And then under socialism, socialism was enforced by the state or some of those. Let's look at communism in Russia. Is whoever had the power to determine that the system has to be that way. So it became either a right wing or left wing. By that extreme left and then extreme right. And under socialism, I think in the way it's being used here is where a society, those who can be individuals, their talents, their rights, or their abilities are sort of curtailed because they are told what to do and what not to do by other individuals who think the way to go is only the socialist approach. So even though he's not saying socialism is bad, not saying capitalism is bad, he's saying look between these two systems. You are not meant to go either way because, again, we're talking about dialectics of thought. Look at both of them, find the right system that works for your people. And I think let's listen to a young man in Botswana, Boko, who came into power and said, we are not going to look at socialism and say socialism is good or capitalism and say capitalism is good. We are going to be pragmatic. We will take what is best for our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Coco. Of course, I remember there's a concept coming in as called scientific socialism. And there's what we call socialism. Anyway, Brother Carrington, back to you. Brother Carrington, before you come in, I'll say that I might not claim to have answered what you ask. I also try just to share my thinking on what you ask, and I believe I'll also have to share this. If Brother Kwame will join us today, or if he join us next time, we'll also try to engage him a bit also to understand what is his thinking in regards to this as well. Yes, Brother Coco?
Oh,
Brother Carrington, please proceed.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brother Pigeon. Actually, you started to answer, and then Sister Tapua built upon it, and of course, Brother Coco built upon it. Of course, it's a complicated thing because it depends. I've seen it also depends a bit with how you define socialism as such, but also it is buried in the definition that the collective must come out of the individual anyway. So it is a decision individuals make to live in a socialist or capitalist state, if I understood Sister Tapua and Brother Coco. So thank you very much, the three of you, for your answers. It clears it up for me a bit. I can see how somebody can get from individualism as an ideology to socialism. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Now, yeah, actually, thank you for, you've also now tried to simplify it. But actually, you're looking at then individualism vis-a-vis egalitarianism. And all speaks of individual. Either egalitarianism or individualism is all about individual. So whether you think that individual is worth, then you'll have to advance beyond individualism as it's known in capitalist thinking to an individualism that then can contribute to a social setup, which brings then egalitarianism and no longer an individualism as individual. But all two, either it's egalitarian or individualism, they all focus on individual. But egalitarianism recognizes then the worth of that individual to contribute to the bigger thing and then makes them all equal. Individualism, as it is in capitalist thinking, is about me who have the money, I'm the master. The rest of you are all the workers and all I need is money. But I think it's a conversation, as I've said. I will also try to engage Brother Kwame if he joins us next time to understand his answer, but we can also highlight the paragraph, only the sentence, and he can be able to respond even before we get to our next class in our conscious and study group, which is meant to further discussions from this point. Sister Topo, your hand is up. I don't know if you want to come in again, but I want to go to Brother the King, then I go to... Yeah, I want to go to Brother the King first, then Joe, then Sir Windhoek.
Brother, yeah.
Yes, Sister Tapo?
It's okay, you can let the brother speak. Thank you.
Okay, Brother the King Mauli, please feel free to share your thinking in regards to the all paragraphs. We have actually highlighted the 3 paragraphs because we thought they are speaking of the same content. I always do that before, so I always try to read if they are all a continuation, then we make them one. But feel free, Brother the King, to share with us your thinking in regards to the paragraphs highlighted.
Okay, but I was distracted a little bit, so I couldn't follow.
Okay, so are you able to take me time to reread the paragraph, and then you can come back and share?
Yes, I will do that right away.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. So I'll give you time to do that. Brother
All
Joe,
right.
Joe Njaba, Dr. Joe. Dr. Joe, please feel free to unmute yourself and share with us your thinking as well.
I'm sorry, I am not in a position to speak now, but maybe in a subsequent discussion, really contribute.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope this is your first or second time.
My first time.
Okay, I know you have to take time to observe a bit, but hope you like what you're trying to do.
You know, it's good, especially as you are trying to be pragmatic to see how our sister, is it Tapoa, how it relates to the present situation of the black people or the continental black descent. So it's so wonderful.
Welcome. Thank you. We've been just trying to build our thinking like that. So we train each other to try to think highly and try to master and see things and try to relate them to contemporary African setup and find a solution on how we can get ourselves out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I am really a thinker. I think too much.
You joining us from which country?
I'm calling from the US.
Okay. Feel most welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, sir.
Sawindok from Namibia. Sawindok. Hope you'll be able to share your thinking. Feel free to share or even ask any question, Sawindok. Sawindok. Okay.
Greetings, everybody.
Greetings, sir.
As you can hear, I'm driving and my network is very bad. So I think it has even cut out. So I will just be listening in seriously. Very challenging.
Okay, thank you. Feel free also to use the chat in case you want to contribute anything via text. Feel free also to use the chat. Raspala from South Africa, Jayanunaki. I know you've joined us now. If you want to contribute, I'll allow you to do. If you want us to continue with the discussion as you try to make or form your thinking, it's also well, we'll give you time to do that. So let me know what you like. General
Yes,
Naki.
my lord. Yes, my lord. Yes, I.
So should we give you time to come back later?
Yes, please. I'm just trying to get around. I came here a little bit late.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm just taking it back again to some few things that are coming up in this text. Especially, I'm trying to read the first paragraph where he says that Nkrumah says that he has suggested that attempt to fix categories or basic general concepts in terms of which alone the world must appear to us and become intelligible is an attempt to halt the dialectic of thought, an attempt to freeze it into a certain stage. What do you think of that, Mother Carrington? What do you think of that sentence?
So, sorry, repeat which sentence?
The first sentence which says that Nkrumah says, I have suggested that the attempt to fix categories, basic concepts, in terms of which alone the world must appear to us and become intelligible, is an attempt to halt the dialectic of thought, an attempt to freeze it in at a certain stage.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I will explain the way I understand, and then we'll proceed from there. In earlier chapters, there was a materialist discussion of the universe, nature, society, etc. That society, the universe, nature come from certain very basic units, primordial units, which can be combined in certain different ways to come up with different objects. And these objects can be basically changed into each other using the process of categorical conversion. Now, there is an attempt by several philosophers to identify these basic things. Right now, we are discussing Aristotle. Aristotle, I think, but I can be corrected by people who have been trained in philosophy, is the person who comes with the 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water. I think, I don't know whether it is him or some other Greek philosophers added something called quintessence. Now, if you accept that these are using these 4 or 5 things, you can essentially build the world, you can build the universe, you can build everything that is possible, then you have found certain categories and you have general concepts for combining them. And then now the world will arise deterministically, it will arise surely out of this process. And that attempt of fixing, of freezing, of saying that it must be this way will then allow you to determine and explain the universe according to you. Now, what Osagyefo is saying is that this might not be the best approach, that every culture, every time, every period, every era has its way of understanding things. Right now, we are in the digital era. We are understanding everything in terms of computation. A few decades before that, we were understanding everything in terms of steam engines, in terms of mechanics. Before that, we understood the world in terms of spirits when we were less materialist. And every society sort of has to invent the basic concepts with which it will use to organize nature. And this means that every society has to invent the basic concepts which it will use to organize the society itself. And therefore, these 2 processes that are running in parallel have implications for each other. If someone is telling you a perfect story of the universe, they are likely to sell you a perfect story of society. And the Osagyefo, I think, here is inviting us to reject perfect stories.
Thank you, Brother Carrington. Of course, is an attempt that I wanted to understand. We actually, at some class, I think the last class, we asked about society being static. Because when you say it's perfect, you also claim it's static.
Yes, it has attained a state of perfection, so it shouldn't and can't change here.
And that is what Nkrumah is saying, is actually ignoring dialectics, or even what he ends in that chapter talking about social evolution, which you get in the next chapter. Because then dialectics then recognize a continuous motion, contestation, and movement, and different ideas in society or even at a personal level. For example, your brain alone cannot be just unipolar. There has to be different ideas running in your mind. There are sometimes conflicting ideas running in your mind. And in that conflict, then you are able to internalize and come up with maybe what you might call close to perfect, but maybe a better idea on what you have to do. Because you'll be having like something's telling you, can I go cook? And they say, no, go sleep. So dialectics exist. But then, actually, what I'm also getting is by deducing or purporting that it's fixed or society is like static, you actually try to freeze it to a certain stage of perfection. And that is very wrong, because Isina Nkrumah goes to the second line and says, in the dialectic of thought, a cardinal idea is introduced, it is worked out into some considerable details. After a certain point, an idea is antithetic to it appears on the scene again. And in an attempt to reconcile them, a new idea is again produced. So societies are moved. For example, if you look at the evolution from issues to do with the agrarian revolution to issues to do with the what you call industrial revolutions to now digital revolution, it's I think a clear example that society is not static, and ideas come in, they contradict or they conflict, but they have been exhaustively worked on before another idea come in. I think to an extent that there's no, it loses relevance a bit, then another idea that is to that time coming to be adopted or to be taken in. I don't know how others feel about that as well. So hear what others think in regards to that as well. Brother Coco?
Sister Tapua actually elaborated on this so well. It was amazing. But allow me to try and highlight what she said. If we live in a society in which, because we differ in views, in perspectives, then we end up trying to force everyone to be like us, then that's not a society which is egalitarian, in short. And it's the same in the West where we live right now. You find that the police, the security, the army, everything, they are there to protect the government, regardless of what that government is doing against its own people. Ironically, the people are the owners. The people are the principals. But because the West, they think that they have reached the point of maturity, and cannot change, then they do everything. They throw all the resources to ensure that the system remains what it is. And as a result of that, then we become stale. We don't grow. But let's look at China, for instance. China started as a outright communist country, but has changed, gradually changed, embracing liberalism and adopting a different economic model, which has helped China grow along and take 300 million plus out of poverty, because it allowed the dialectics of thought to happen within the Chinese Communist Party. So to us as Africans, we need to think about our parties. That's what Sister Tapua said, that the ANCs, the ZANU-PF, all of them, they want people who think and act in certain ways. If you don't think and act in certain ways, then you are not one of them. And I think what she was trying to say here, actually, again, was we will differ in ideas, we will differ in thoughts, we will differ in perspectives. Just for instance, tonight here, I put something else on the table, and Sister Tapua came up with something else, and then Brother Carrington came up with something else. You find that none of us is wrong, for instance, but we are differing. We have different thoughts, all right? And that is how we are supposed to be growing as Africans. But the philosophers, Aristotle and the others, fixing the cardinal points, is saying this is where it has to be. It has to stay here. All the discussions have to center around this point within these parameters, and they should not go anywhere else. That way is not allowing ideas to develop. It's stifling ideas, it's stifling innovation. And again, Singapore went back and said, let's not just want to go to pre-colonial times. Let's look at what we can pick from there. Through the system which they have introduced to us is autocratic. We are living in dictatorial times right now. But what is it that we can throw away, and what is it that we can keep? So we should not throw away the baby with the bathwater. Thank you.
Brother Carrington,
Yes. Yes.
can I step in just for at least 5 minutes as I pick something to continue engaging in this paragraph extensively?
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, brothers and sisters, we are proceeding with trying to understand this paragraph. And Brother Coco has raised a very important point that I think is very critical for Africa, the balancing of tradition and modernity and futurism. We have to balance the past, the present, and the future. And I don't think it is an either or. And I normally, personally, disagree with the positions that say that we should go back to the past, we should get trapped in the future. I think we should look at it like a tree and just basically say the past is the roots, the present is the stem, the future is the leaves. And because of this, we need the entire tree. We can't choose parts of the tree. It's just about understanding ourselves and our culture as Africans and how we can move forward informed by the past and the present, and also the possibilities of the future. But anyway, I'd like to hear what other people have said. I just joined now. Anyone with a perspective? Brother General Anunaki from South Africa, Sawubona. Do you have something to add here?
Yes, give thanks, my Lord. Blessed. Okay, let me add something from what I'm picking up so far from even my brother here, Brother Coco from Lesotho. Yeah. Okay. Okay, first of all, from what I can take, we need to understand that the Europeans themselves, talking about their mindset, comes from an environment of isolation and few resources. That is the place called Europe. We know most of the Europeans or the so-called white people only had world domination for the past 500 years. And before the 500 years, black people, the so-called Moors, were ruling over Europe. So now with that being said, they had to fight and have competition for food there in Europe amongst themselves, the white people. You see, that's now before the black people as Moors came to recolonize Europe and teach them how to make hot water and refrigerate, how to preserve their meat using salt, etc., etc. So they were staying in caves, and staying in caves, they even used to be cannibals, you see, because at sometimes they couldn't get hunt because of the frost in Europe. And so sometimes the weakest member in the family had to be consumed. You see, that is basically the society that they were staying in Europe prior to the 500 years of world dominance. So now that behavior we can see even in the educational institutes of the Europeans, whereby it emphasizes on the individual mind and competition within the learners. So now the African learners who come from a communal background in Africa enter a school whereby now they are forced to think individually. You see, you sit on your own desk, You have your own thoughts, your own paper, your own examination paper, and also you have to compete with other fellow African learners or other learners in your class. Who is the top learner? Who is the weakest learner? Who, you see? So that is basically how the mindset of the white person or the European operates through individualism and competition. And I think Elder Kwame Nkrumah is trying to emphasize that in this context of this issue of individualism within the mind of the white person. So because they really do not have, I'm sorry to put this, for lack of a better term, they don't really have a soul. So they cannot be communal people, but instead they are people who think, who are self-centered, and they are people who compete even with their own for resources. And before I close, look at the issue of World War II. You see, Hitler is a white man, Russia is owned by a white man, America is owned by a white man. But now, because Germany is ahead in terms of technology, education, and even discovery, in terms of reaching other places on earth that no white man has ever reached, now the white man who owns USA and Russia, they get jealous, and then they team up, and then they destroy the white man with Hitler who owns Germany. And then they take the resources of Hitler, they split it 50-50, you see. So that is the basic behavior of the white man. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Nunaki, for your very, very, very strong views. I'd like to ask you a question, though. How do you explain then something like Mfekane? How do you explain the Mfekane? In the case of the wars and contests in Africa, not just the Mfekane, the wars and contests of West Africa and East Africa. How do you explain pre-colonial wars and conquest in the case of Africa?
Give thanks, Elder. Now, when you talk about Umfekane or wars of contest within the African states, it's another different story, because if you look at the African context, in Africa, when there was a smaller tribe that is a neighbor of a stronger tribe, let's take for instance my ethnic people, the Xhosa people. Within the Xhosa people, we have the Tembus, we have the Mpondos, the Mpondomise, etc. Those are the smaller tribes. So now, because these smaller tribes were neighbors of the Xhosa royal kingdom, they had to be assimilated by the Xhosa kingdom. Now, how did they assimilate them? They assimilated them culturally, you see. They introduced their Xhosa culture through trade and intermarriage of the women, where the Xhosa men married the women of the Tembus, and the Tembus took women from the Xhosa. And so, what I'm trying to say is that we as Africans have a more civil way of doing things, whereas the one I'm talking about concerning Europe, as you can see what's happening now in the world, they kill you.
Yeah, can I come in when there's space?
Yes, yes. I was waiting for Brother Nunaki before I admit you. Yeah. Brother Nunaki, are you finished? Oh, Brother Nunaki is not around. Okay, Sister Tapua, you can come in and then we will proceed. Yes, Sister Tapua, please.
Right. I put my hand up initially because when we started talking about Europe, in my mind, I perceived two collectives. Remember, we're talking about a collective that can either be capitalist or socialist. So in my mind, what I have is a European collective, which my brother has been talking about, Anunnaki, and the African collective. The African collective is different in terms of what they want to achieve, because they are acknowledging that a person is a person because of other people. Whereas in the European collective, you have the top dog must own everything, and others are subjugated to serve that person. Whereas in the African context, which for me is one of the reasons why Europe found it much easier to colonize Africa with almost minimal wars, because Africans believe that human beings live on earth. So when someone comes into your village and says, I'm looking for somewhere to live, you cannot say to them, there's no space, because where are they going to go? Outer space. So in the context of Zimbabwe, for example, when the missionaries came and the colonialists came and the Portuguese came, they were very subtle about how they got their foot in the door. Because at some point, one of the kings in this region, Lobengula, had to send an emissary to the queen to say, this is not what I meant. Every human being has a right to live on earth. So if your people come here, I'm not going to stop them. I'm going to give them a piece of land and they're going to live under my rule. And unfortunately, this was a clash of ideas, of collectives. So what we have now, I always want to come back to now, is a situation where when the colonialists came, they came with this idea that we will get from you everything and we will give you what we want to. And they will give you pittance. They will turn you into slaves, which is what my brother has been talking about, Anunnaki. Because when Africans went to war, I'm from a group, I'm from one of the last standing states in this part of the world, Southern Africa, the Barwe Kingdom. When the Portuguese came, they struggled to defeat the Barwes because the Barwes had armed themselves in terms of guns. They were making their own gunpowder. And people from around the Barwe Kingdom were coming to take refuge. The Barwe Kingdom would go out to defeat people, other groups. But the concept of defeat is not subjugation. So when they went out and extended their kingdom, the people who were in charge of the neighbors would still continue to be in charge of the neighbors. They would still continue to own their fields. All they had was allegiance, which is totally different from the subjugation that results from the wars in Europe. So the Europeans came here with their idea of war and defeated us totally and threw us into the most barren parts of the country, which we could not conceptualize and which we took time to understand. Because if we're saying munu munu ne wamwe wanu, you are a person because I am a person because of other people, how could they do that? We couldn't think that way. It took us some time to think that way. So, like my brother is saying, the concepts of war and the reason for war are different. Mfecane happened because people were extending their kingdoms. But when you're subjugated, you're not enslaved. You're not treated inhumanely because you are a human. And because if I treat you that way, then I'm not acknowledging that I am because you are. So the results are totally different, totally different. And that's where we then started to, amongst ourselves, we are now experts at becoming the colonialists. Because how the political parties in Africa are behaving is taking after their masters. You cannot have an idea. If you have a contrary idea, then you're not for us, and you've got to be suppressed, they say. And that's exactly the opposite of what used to happen in an African court. Because the king would hear everyone's voice, and people would come to a consensus, whether you were opposed or not. But now we have a situation where if you are in opposition, you are an enemy. Just like the settlers would say, I mean, you're black, therefore you cannot contribute anything to what we own because this is ours. And I put a question in the chat asking, what is it that we need to do to try and bring this idea that everybody is part of a system in the African context? Because like one of my brothers said, maybe the American democracy, in quotation marks, I put it, is maybe more mature, but can we bridge that gap? Because we've got to find a way of living together on the continent with our differences. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Tapua. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Carrington, for helping a bit or stepping in. I think you are going to the core of the conversation. Because when you're looking at philosophy and society, is what type of a society do you want? And it's very simple, Sister Tapua. When we first of all start with, that's why we started chapter 1 with the philosophy in retrospect. How do we understand the universe, including ourselves? Where have we come from? And when we understand the fundamental conclusion of our first chapter, that everything comes from the same matter, including every human being comes from the same matter. And when we understand we come from the same matter, then we understand that we are just segments or parts of what makes a whole. The matter might be, for example, in this case, we come from the same bread. So our differences in terms of gender, age, color are only segments of the same bread. If we can understand that, it will even change how we treat each other, how we view each other, and it can even go extra mile to even understand how do we react to people who create the issue of racism and things that we are different races. Because we come from the same matter, therefore we are one human race coming from the same thing. But this lack of understanding then forms the foundation on how we have miseducated the society, misdirected the society, and we have created so many inequalities that then don't make things right. Because, for example, out of that, if we could understand, and I think where Ubuntu is then deeply rooted, leave alone the slogan of I am because you are, but how is it that I am because you are? What is making me to be the same as you are? It's because we make part of the same thing. And that aspect of creating separation and difference amongst us as a people in a society has led to so many issues. And Nkrumah confirms in the previous paragraph that yes, egalitarianism do not mean lack of existence or lack of existence or in that line, but he says
lack of difference.
Lack of difference. That's it, lack of difference. He said that egalitarianism does not mean lack of difference, but that difference is only functional differences. You can either call it physical, functional, gender, and functional, it goes also maybe gender differences. which so many people do not understand, including Aristotle and Plato were actually not understanding. Because treat the differences, and is what you're saying, dialectics, treat the dialectics or differences in a society only at functional level. Some people say there might only be differences in policies, but not in principle. In principle, we are no different. But now people advance that differences in functions to mean that we are totally different as persons. And they go extra mile, for example, now to treat those who are calling themselves doctors to be more high in a society, politicians to be more high in a society, teachers to be more low in a society, and even to an extent, you subject some people into slum or ghetto life, and you don't care about that. To an extent that the white men could enslave us and think that we are not human beings and treat us as if we are not, and bring the aspect of superiority and inferiority, which is actually lack of understanding of the basic fundamentals or foundations. And this has been exercised up to date, even in relationship, even in a society, in marriage. Some people say, no, that one cannot speak. No, this is the only person who has a right to vote or to speak. As you have mentioned, sister, is that the chiefs in our society could listen to anyone and everyone, and they could make a decision. But look at our political system. Look at even a system that then produce, like people use parliamentary system in election, where the president is only elected by members of parliament, whom the members of parliament are either believed to be able enough to make the president. And that is the type of the democracy that Aristotle was talking about, the Greek society. That some people who are not actually thought to have ability to make socio-political decisions, and it was left to some only group of persons. This is a fundamental difference that you are fighting here. And how do you then balance your individual to a collective? How do you balance the limit your individual interest not to overcome the collective interest? And you have seen so many times, individual interests have always overcome or supersedes collective differences. That's why somebody could take a whole tract of land in your village and don't care what you have. Everybody can own every vehicle they want, and they don't care who doesn't have or who has. This actually need to be changed. And as we ask, we need to formulate a way to change it. Let me get to the hands that are up. Is it Brother Coco first or who is first? Yes. Sister Mara, I haven't heard from you. Are you able to speak first, Sister Mara? Or you are still not able to speak? And then I'll go to either Brother Coco Tapua. Any one of you want to come in? Because I didn't know the order of hands coming up.
I'm going to go first, if you don't mind, my brother.
Okay.
Right. Thank you very much for talking about the differences in individuals not being important in the collective. Because I have studied a bit of gender and the differences in how we view gender between Europe and Africa, and how it's even beginning to affect our relationships in families. The fact that amongst us, amongst us as Africans, women were not looked down upon, because we acknowledge that each person has a role to play, and the role is equal to everybody else's. This is why, for example, in the African context, we have some matrilineal societies and we have patrilineal societies. We have armies that were made up of women and we have armies that were made up of men. In other words, we were able to go beyond looking at what a woman is in terms of function and then determine status because of that. Because the fundamentals, like we're saying, is you are human, let alone the function. So when we come to families in an African context, everyone is important. The father acknowledges that the family would not be there without the mother, and she's got a very important role. And the children have an important role. In the culture where I come from in Zimbabwe, you cannot have a family meeting without everybody being there, including the young kids. And once a topic is introduced, it goes around the room. Everyone's making a comment or acknowledging that they've heard what's been said. And for me, when we're talking about the alien things such as equal rights, for me, it's just so alien, because equal rights is assuming that somebody has been disadvantaged, but not in the African context. In the culture where I come from, you do not demean your mother at all. You can't even talk of equal rights in the Western concept. So what we have is an imposition here of ideas that are foreign, and we're trying to grapple on the ground with our reality. Because I remember when I was in one of the universities in Europe, and someone was saying this idea that women must get out of the kitchen and what have you and all that. And I said to them, do you realize what you're saying? And they said, what? And I said, you're coming to Africa with your ideas. You are imposing your ideas on our society when we actually don't have a problem. The problem that we're having is you've introduced a foreign concept that we don't quite understand. Because what I was telling them was, if you get the woman out of the kitchen, in an African context, food plays a central role to life. If you then say to a woman, leave the kitchen to claim your equal rights, I mean, that's wild. It doesn't work. It's not going to work. So what we have is a situation where we need to make sure we find a way, like I presented a question in the chat. We need to find a way of getting ourselves confident to be Africans, to understand why we do things the way we do, not through the eyes of the Western idea, but through our eyes. We have to get back to our eyes to see the future. Because if we don't get back to our eyes to see the future, we're going to be seeing the future through someone else's glasses, and it's all distorted. And it's resulting in us being confused. We don't know who we are. We don't have our identity. So we're getting back to that place where we need to find ourselves. Sorry, I sound preachy. I think I've got to end.
No, you rarely speak. You need to
Let
us, but you've
me
spoken.
say something pertaining to what is on the floor. I'm sorry, I had a call.
Okay, brother, Joe, you'll speak, and then I'll go to Brother Coco. We are having 8 minutes to the end of this, so please speak. Just go ahead.
Okay. I have been, some Pan-African forums, and when we hear too much about tribalism being the major cause of friction and poor leadership in Africa, I know Osajifo did well by choosing a language which assisted in binding the country together in Ghana. And efforts have been made for other regional communities to look for common languages which will help people to transcend clan boundaries and unite the people, make us know that with the Bantu origin or relationship. But I come back again with this aspect, which is contemporary. When the Western world, people from the North or colonizers, whatever word they use there, when they take the satellite in the air to view Africans' rich minerals, or as they say, if the vaccines, the COVID-19, whatever it is, virus and other viruses which are man-made, and trying to see how it can impact the continent. They are not looking at countries. They are looking at, we want to eliminate these people. It transcends boundaries. Why is it that when somebody who comes from Africa causes a problem abroad, they don't see him as a Nigerian, or it's an African who has caused the problem? So it beats my imagination. Some of these things make us to know that we are one. And if they are doing something to reduce the population or to make the continent remain in poverty, they are not looking at Nigeria suffering. Because people cross from Cameroon to Nigeria, from Nigeria to Ghana, from South Africa to Zimbabwe, from South Africa to Malawi, So all those things, when you compress those thoughts, there is need for our people to see themselves as one. The money you use from one country to the next, it has no tribal inclination in it. It's the same money. The same too with the air you breathe in the continent. Why come back and start telling the people, oh, this water I'm drinking is from Zimbabwe. This air I'm breathing is from Niger. You are stupid. So the contemporary African needs to work on his philosophical concepts to know that when they see you, they don't know where you come from. They just know that you are African. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution, sir. We have 4 minutes to the end. Brother Coco?
Thank you, brother, and welcome, Dr. Joe. I think I'm going to try to answer the question posed by Sister Tapiwa. I know I won't get it right. We are each other. We are each a manifestation of God, all of us. When I see you, Brother Pickwick, I need to see a reflection of myself. I need to see the God in me and the God in you. But trauma has taught us otherwise. It has taught us to fear each other or one another. And the manifestation of that trauma, it comes in as fear. And that fear, the way it works is that you get into power, you want to accumulate as much material wealth as possible while you are in power, because you don't know who's going to come next and what they're going to take for themselves. So there's always this constant fear because you're competing. But unfortunately, you're all competing on very, very bad indicators, very, very bad things. You are trying to build the wealth just for your own family. Is that it? Or just for your own clan? It doesn't work like that. All of them, everyone has to have a share. And that's egalitarianism, is what we have been talking about. Before I log off, the Frantz Fanon, one of our famous writers, he talked about loss of identity by us, the Africans. I think Sister Sapua referred to this briefly. There is what we call hierarchy in the European way of doing things versus what we do, which is, there is no hierarchy in Africa. There is that egalitarianism. Where hierarchy met egalitarianism, it destroyed it completely. The African was made to feel he was not good enough as a black man. But at the same time, he was not welcome in a white society. So most of these brothers, what they wanted to do, they wanted to feel white enough, and they continue to accumulate the materials. But again, they're forgetting who they are. They're forgetting themselves. So Afrocentrism, egalitarianism, Ubuntu, Maat are the things which are going to help us to go back to who we are. Thank you.
Thank you, comrades. It's been actually a engaging conversation. I do appreciate, and I want to appreciate everyone and each one of you who has taken their time to be part of this conversation. This is what we do. To us, it gets more interesting every day we do it. So we don't give up, we don't stop, and we've never actually missed it for the last 2 years every day. So thank you very much. We will continue. Somebody kept asking me, why you talk Aristotle every day? I told him we are a reading, not only a reading, a philosophical group. So we don't skip anything that Nkrumah wrote. We read it and try to analyze it. We don't know when will we reach the end of the book, because we are not even focused on finishing and go to the next. We are finding a lot of information and learning a lot by each and every paragraph. And to us, I think that's the consciousness we have to attain. And we believe that many persons who have joined us have been impacted in one way or the other, have found the content very, very useful, and have actually even changed their thinking, their dimension, and their consciousness. That is what we envision. So this, let me ask Sister Myra, if you're around to maybe end out with maybe anything from your side to close this session for today. If there's none, then I will just close this session. Sister Myra? Okay. I think she's not able to speak. So just to notify you that our chair, Brother Kwame, hasn't been able to join us today. You know, he's a teacher and he sometimes gets engaged in one or two things, but he's with us. And I would like to inform you that the recordings for this session and the Saturday one will actually be availed by next week on Tuesday or Wednesday. The recording of our previous class or last week, which was a discussion prior to this, is already available on our channels, which is our YouTube channel. Anytime, feel free to go back to our YouTube channel and please listen to any recording you want to listen to, because we have captured and shared all of them, so many of them from the past to date. This Saturday, we are looking at a conversation, if I can check, is Agenda 2063. The flagship project will be reviewing AU Agenda 2063. We'll have a conversation in that because that is in line with what we do, which is called the unification session. So every Saturday we have Africa unification session. So we'll be trying to critically analyze this African Union Agenda 2063. Last week we did Africa Free Continental Free Trade Agreement. So once again, comrades, looking forward to see you on this Saturday or next week on Thursday. Just to inform you, our Pan-African library is also growing very huge. We now have over 700 to 800 books shared so far, speaking to African or Pan-Africanism, or in regards to us as a people, from slave trade, culture, and everything else. If you want to join our Pan-African library, feel free to get in touch with me so that we can add you there, where I do share soft copy books every day in the morning, and Sister Mara is the one in charge of that group. And Tuesday we have our Kiswahili classes where we teach Kiswahili for Pan-Africans. That's a contribution we give. So also feel free to join us in any of the dates. Without taking much of your time, permit me to bring this meeting to an end at this particular moment. See you again on coming next this Saturday, Tuesday, or Thursday. Blessed evening to you all.
Thank you.